The Seals in Teal, a San Jose Sharks podcast, with your host, Lars Yonk. Well, Sharks fans, what can we say and do during this time? Missing hockey is definitely one of them. First of all, we need to really talk about this season. This was a memorable season. And no, not for the right reasons. So many things transpired during the 2019-2020 season for the San Jose Sharks, making it one of the most unique seasons in team history. Today, I'm going to talk about where this all started, and many of you are wondering what happened. And I believe I know what happened to the Sharks this season and why the wheels kind of fell off all the way they did. In order to go forward, we need to go back. And going back means going back to the 2018-2019 season. In the playoffs, Game 5, 2019 Western Conference Finals, the St. Louis Blues had just scored to make it 2-0. That's when everything fell apart for the Sharks. And I'm going to explain how this continued to go into the next season. You could see immediately after the Blues had scored their second goal, Sharks collapsed. Immediately afterwards, the team looked lost and confused. They had no sense of where they were. The Blues would then thrash the Sharks 5-0 and then take the series in Game 6 and win the Cup. Things in the summer were about to get a little bit more tricky. This whole 2018-2019 season was supposed to be Cup or bust. Ultimately, it was a bust. Going forward into the summer, on June 18th, 2019, the Sharks traded Justin Braun to the Philadelphia Flyers for a second and third round pick. It was a fair return in the end. Braun was really an amazing defenseman with the Sharks. He rose through the organization as a late-round pick, was a solid shutdown defenseman alongside Marc-Edouard Vlasic. Fun fact about Braun, as a defenseman, in the Stanley Cup Finals history for the San Jose Sharks, he scored the most goals as a defenseman, scoring 2. Next, we had Jonas Donskoi, free agent, who scored one of the biggest goals in team history, Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Finals 2016, putting the Sharks back into the series, giving us a chance. Unfortunately, things were just not working in the end between Donskoi and the Sharks. He was a great player, but there were many times where he was inconsistent. He could go on a great scoring streak, but immediately after that, he would cool off. So when he went to Colorado, it was sad to see him go, but you had to only be happy for him because you knew he was going to get another good opportunity somewhere else. It just didn't look like he was going to continue with the Sharks any further. Didn't really look like he had much more of a future with the Sharks. Gustav Nyquist, a trade addition from the 2019 deadline, would sign with Columbus, where he is doing well there. In my opinion, Nyquist wasn't really impressive with the Sharks when he was traded to us. I know he didn't really have a lot of time to adjust, but there have been some players who, when they're traded to a new team at the deadline, make an immediate impact. I could say Mark Stone of the Vegas Golden Knights made an immediate impact for the Knights going forward. I was hoping based on when we did trade for Nyquist, he would come in as a top 6 forward and really help up there. Didn't quite make that impact, and it was pretty safe to say he didn't have much of a future in San Jose, so he went to Columbus. Then, of course, we lost our heart and soul player, Captain America, Captain Joe Pavelski. It was definitely a gut punch for him to leave. But looking at the whole entire situation with the salary cap, we were totally pinned against it. We didn't really have a lot of options. And this all comes down to a little bit of Doug Wilson. And there was a split. Do we keep Erik Karlsson or do we keep Joe Pavelski? It was really a 50-50. Some, of course, more would be Pavelski, but others still wanted to give Erik Karlsson a chance because we still felt like he still had more to prove. He had a very injury-riddled season, and we were hoping to see a little bit more from him. He was the younger player in the end. I was more sided toward Erik Karlsson. I really felt because he was still in his late 20s. I still felt like he could give a lot to the organization. And Pavelski had just come off almost like 2 concussions in the playoffs. Term and money weren't quite there, so he would sign with Dallas. Of course, not easy to watch for us, but of course you always wish the best for these players wherever they go. It is business at the end of the day. Going into the summer the rest of the way, not a lot happened, but we kind of had an idea who would be the next captain of the San Jose Sharks. Logan Couture would be named the team captain. A lot of people liked the decision. Couture is a very clutch player. He's proved himself in some of the biggest games, especially Game 7 versus Vegas. He really stepped up. Couture is really a heart kind of player. He loves to get his team into it. He's a no BS kind of guy. He speaks when something is going on the team. Having him as the captain, I thought, okay, Couture being captain, I think he's going to really try to push the guys forward. And that was the hope, ultimately, everyone was hoping to see, and the results going forward. Going into the preseason, well, it was a disastrous preseason. Now, I know many people don't necessarily look at preseason as a big deal. It's just, that terrible start in the preseason kind of left some negativity for the Sharks. It wasn't really a great preseason. And that leads into our first 2 games to the Golden Knights. They got a little bit of revenge on us, not a whole lot, but it stung. They beat us 4-1 the first game, the next game 5-1. We'd lose our first 4 games of the season. One of the worst starts in recent history. Patrick Marleau would then sign with the team, and in his debut back, he would score 2 goals and help us win. October wasn't that great for the Sharks. However, they would rebound big time in November. Then December rolled around, and things just weren't looking great for the Sharks. It just felt like they were kind of still in that rut. Couldn't get over 500. On December 11th, 2019, the San Jose Sharks fired head coach Peter DeBoer alongside some other coaching staff, Steve Spott, Dave Barr, Johan Hedberg. I was actually really shocked to hear DeBoer was fired. I knew going into the season there might be some questions because the system was still the same from 2015, 2016. And DeBoer wasn't really much of an adjusting head coach. He would always just throw in the line combinations into a blender and see what would happen. What really shocked me the most was DW had never fired a coach mid-season. Doug Wilson, in his 17 years with the Sharks, had never fired a coach mid-season. That's when you knew we were very desperate to get back to maybe a winning streak, maybe be a St. Louis. Ultimately, again, Ottawa had our first-round pick from the Erik Karlsson trade. My thoughts on DeBoer was, he was a great coach for the Sharks that very first season. However, despite leading us to the Stanley Cup final, you could see his system wasn't really changing for the Sharks. I mean, it was a bland style of play. It was very much predictable, a slow dump and chase, send it to the point for a shot on net, hopefully for a tip. It felt like we were very one-dimensional scoring. So naturally, when we did fire Peter DeBoer, I was excited to see what Bob Boughner could do for us. Unfortunately, under Boughner, the Sharks never really quite improved as we had hoped. There were some good moments along the way, but injuries were holding the team back. He really tried to go to that 2015-16 team style, but to no avail, it wasn't quite materializing. So with that, it just never felt like there was a lot of changes that maybe could have been done. I think a new system, a clean slate for everyone would have been great, but just a lot of things hanging on from the past a little bit. What we do need to talk about, though, for this season also with the Sharks, a lot of younger players had to step up for the season. One in particular, Mario Ferraro. He has been a bright spot for this team. Going forward, I'm excited to see what he can do. He was one of the best defensemen, in my opinion, for the Sharks this season. He was a very consistent player. Before the season started, when I heard Cale Makar said that he was the hardest working player he knew, that's when you know you got a gem for your team, especially coming from a player like Cale Makar, who will be a future Norris Trophy winner and arguably going to be one of the big defensemen of the future. We'll see where Mario Ferraro ultimately goes on this team, but he will easily be a top 4 defenseman, and his game is only going to get better from here, so that's something positive going forward. We also had Noah Gregor, who came in for a bit. Very speedy player. He has a great shot. If you see some of his goals this season, he has a heck of a shot. He'll definitely need a little bit more time to develop the game a little bit more in the NHL, but I think there's a lot of positives. He played on the top line. He did a solid job. Alexander True also did a good job when he came in for a little bit. Big centerman. I hope to see a little bit more of him. Suomela, again, did a great job. Gambrell came in, did a good job, but for those two, I still would love to see them step up their game a little bit more. They did a great job when they were on the 4th line, but I still think they have a little bit more to go. Otherwise, for the season we were having, they did a pretty good job coming in. Joel Shellman was awesome center for the Sharks. Did a great job. He was a great pairing with Stefan Nason and Melker Karlsson. Shellman on a really good team would be a solid 4th line center, 3rd line center for a lot of other teams. So there are still some players in the prospect pool that need some development. However, I think there still are some positive things we have to look at going forward. Now, of course, the trade deadline. It was obvious at that point, we were going to be sellers at the deadline. As Doug Wilson said, we needed to regain some assets, and the first one to go, sadly, was Brendan Dillon. Tearfully, a day before he was traded, talked about how he really didn't want to leave the Sharks. He loved San Jose. It was really a new home for him. He loved it here. He would be traded to Washington for a 2nd and 3rd round pick. Good deal for both teams. Again, he was a pending UFA. We got a 2nd and 3rd round pick. Can't go wrong. Dillon was an awesome Sharks defenseman. He was really physical, and he was getting better every year. Now, there were some, of course, during the Stanley Cup Finals, everyone said he was really slow. I think when he was at first paired later on with Erik Karlsson, I think his game improved from there. And the last 2 seasons, he was really starting to improve, so I only hope the best for Dillon going forward. Hopefully, maybe he comes back, you never know. Patrick Marleau was traded to Pittsburgh for a 3rd round pick. Great deal for us. We signed Marleau for only $700,000. Came in, and, he did okay. It was just great to have him back, see him in Teal, and no hard feelings at all for him to go to Pittsburgh. He really deserves a cup. And I feel terrible that we can never help get him a cup. He's been so loyal up until Toronto. I understand his move, but I just hope once the season maybe continues, I really hope maybe he has a chance at the cup. We'll see. Finally, Barclay Goodrow. The man, the myth, the legend of Game 7 from last year. He really stepped up his game during the season despite everything going on. At the last minute of the deadline, he was traded along with a 3rd round pick for a 1st round pick in Anthony Greco of Tampa Bay. When I first heard the news, I couldn't believe a 1st round pick for Barclay Goodrow. Last season he was a 4th liner at best on a really depth team. And I was just thinking, if we got a 1st round pick for Barclay Goodrow, we just fleeced Tampa. And that's what we did. We absolutely fleeced Tampa. I don't care what anyone says. Yeah, we gave a 3rd round pick with Goodrow, but we got a 1st round pick. That was something I think we really needed. Getting back to a 1st round pick. Now, some are going to say, oh, it's a late round 1st round pick. There's not going to be a lot of talent. You just never know. A 1st round pick is a 1st round pick. There have been some late 1st round gems like David Pastrnak, I can name one, Shea Theodore. You just never know. I'm excited to see. I heard DW said he wanted to draft a forward. We'll see. After the trade deadline, the hope for many fans was, let's just hope we can see some kind of improvement for the team. Some good moments. Again, some of the younger players were doing good, but for the most part, it was very abysmal. And then on March 12th, 2020, the NHL suspended all games going forward, thus ending the season for the San Jose Sharks as of right now, putting the final nail in the coffin of this season. It was very memorable. Wow. It was a very unique season. I heard some fans saying, I have never seen a season like this before. And there have been a lot of fans who have seen the Sharks in the early days, the Cow Palace days, when we didn't even win like 10 games in a season. But this was really wow. Wow, wow, wow. So just to read a few more stats on the Sharks' 2019-2020 season so far. Now, checking the stats a little bit more. Looking at the stats, the Sharks were 8th in the Pacific, 15th in the West, which means they were dead last. Average attendance, 16,000. Vander Kane, 26 goals. He was the team leader. I'm going to say it was very safe to say he would have probably hit 30 again. So, despite this bad season, Kane still had some pretty good numbers for goals. Erik Karlsson had the most assists as of right now, 34. Now, many people criticize Erik Karlsson. I'll get into another video about that. And that'll be for another day. I'll talk a little bit more about Erik Karlsson and my opinion on him in San Jose. Timo Meier, 49 points, penalty minutes, Vander Kane. Martin Jones had the most wins, 17, but he did have a 3 goals against average. That will also be for another video. I mean, there's just so many things we can talk about the Sharks going forward. How we can get back to playoff contention. It may seem far for a lot of fans, but you just never know. You just never know. Some teams can go from one bad year to a good year. Sharks, as of right now, have 63 points. They were behind the Kings by 1 point and then the Ducks by 4 points. That was that. There was no way they were going to get to a wild card spot. It's 78 points, so they are totally out of contention. 15 points out. Even if they were to win every game, they are completely out. And that really wraps up the San Jose Sharks season as of now. We'll see if the season continues later on. Personally, I think it will probably be canceled. It's very hard to say what will happen, but no matter what, we're going to root for the Sharks to the end. We got to stay positive. That's what we got to do. All right. There will definitely be more. And this wraps up, a very basic summary of the 2019-2020 season for the San Jose Sharks. Next episode, I will discuss about Bob Boughner. Should the Sharks bring him back, or should we look for another head coach? Thanks again for tuning in. If you like what you hear, please like and subscribe for more content, and I'll talk to you soon. Once again, my name is Lars Young, and thanks again for listening in to the Seals and Teal San Jose Sharks podcast.